Welcome back to IFS Meditations and Insights. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to leave a review of the podcast. It helps others find it. For those that are new, I'm Tim Fortescue, your guide on this journey toward wholeness through the lens of internal family systems. Together, we're creating a sacred space to explore, accept, and love all parts of ourselves. As we do this work, we open ourselves to experiencing divine love and living more authentically. And today's a special episode. I'm interviewing Heather Smith, and it's actually part one of two. Heather is a certified IFS therapist and founder of the Moxie School. And Heather's passionate about integrating IFS and psychedelics. And so in the first episode today, we'll talk more about IFS and psychedelics, and you'll get to see Heather work some with my system and helping me unblend. And then in the next episode, we'll talk more about IFS and spirituality. So let's dive into the conversation. Well, Heather, glad that you're here, and I appreciate your grace. Listeners don't know, but we did this once already, and I didn't get my end uploaded and never got out. And so I'm so grateful to be able to meet with you again. And would just love to hear a little more about you, your journey, and then we can get in and hear more about your work and your work specifically at the Moxie School.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you, Tim, for having me. And I'm more than happy to come back and chat with you some more. Yeah, the work I do is really, it's quite a niche space of the therapeutic world. I'll kind of start at the beginning. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a therapist. It's funny because I don't even really know how I knew what a therapist was, but somehow I had a sense about that as a child. And so, I went and got my master's degree. It was like my whole education was just focused around this career that I knew that I wanted to do, which I find myself really fortunate to have known and felt that clear kind of calling or sense of what I wanted to be. And in 2015, I opened my first private practice. And it was really when I opened my private practice that I felt this huge accountability for providing my clients a true helpful experience in therapy, right? Like I felt like a lot of the tools that I'd been prepared with up till then did not give me a sufficient way to work with people. And so I really started asking this question, like, how do people heal? How do people have true transformation in their lives? And it was shortly after asking that question that I found like IFS just kept popping into my life. It felt like every colleague I spoke to, things I was reading, like IFS just was like streaming into my life. And so I got really curious towards this modality. And it was actually through IFS that I also began to learn about psychedelic-assisted therapy and the research that they'd been doing with FDA in treating PTSD with MDMA. So kind of the rest is history. Once I started finding out about these modalities, it revolutionized my life. So I'm excited to share more about that with you here today.
Yeah. And so you're a therapist, or what are your credentials?
Yeah, sure. Yep. So I have a LPC, a licensed professional counselor, and a master's in counseling. And so at this point, I'm now been trained through the IFS Institute all the way through level 3. I think I've done 2 different level 2s and 2 different level 3s. And I've been a program assistant several times for different trainings with IFS, and I'm certified. So I'm a certified IFS therapist. So that's my formal training. It's kind of funny. When I was, a long time ago, I thought, oh, I'm going to be eclectic. I want to like work with lots of different modalities. And then once I started learning IFS, I was like, oh, maybe I kind of want to be purist.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty true to the model. I definitely do an integration with working with expanded states. But all core tenets of IFS is really pretty much what I follow at this point.
Yeah.
So
this will be a 2-episode deal is my plan. And we're going to talk in a bit or later about kind of spirituality and IFS and maybe how that goes into trauma. So I want to bookend there.
yeah.
That I heard where you had mentioned calling, and I'm curious. Well, I'll try to book in there, and I'll probably forget to bring it up, but we'll figure it out. But I'm curious about calling and how that comes out. And you can share more here because it is your calling, I guess.
Yeah.
How, well, I'm going to forget about it if I don't bring it up now. So calling and what you're doing, IFS,
Mhm.
psychedelics. Could you say more about that? Or
Sure. Yeah. So it's an interesting intersection here. So as a child, I was raised in an evangelical Christian home and church. And, big part of my being raised in that sort of environment or culture was knowing God's plan for your life, or, what have you been called to is what you picked up on in all your calling. So that was very much my immersion of how I was raised. And, I just always held this curiosity around healing and how people heal. And maybe more from a psychological perspective, it was a curiosity of like, can people change? So if we kind of want to interchange words there, change, healing, transformation. Sometimes people have weird language burdens around some of these words. So I like to be a
yeah,
little interchangeable. But I really do feel that the way that I was raised spiritually really informed this sense of desire to help people heal. And I can remember being like a 12-year-old young woman, girl, thinking about that and really holding kind of literally like a vision. I actually found that I'm quite a visionary type
hmm
person. I could sense this vision of helping people heal. And I had this really strong sense that, and guess, how do you know this when you're 12? But it's like I had this deep sense that like things that I would heal in my own life, I would then help other people heal. And so we can talk about that in the next episode. But
yeah.
essentially,
So yeah,
it's been
go. We'll figure
interesting how
out how
all
this
that
pieces
strings together.
together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So who knew psychedelics would ever become a huge part of that?
Yeah. And do you have parts that say, "Oh, this is your calling"? Like, no, it's not the
Yeah.
conflict. Like those parts of what clearly, oh, this is my calling. But wow, you're enjoying this too
Yeah.
much for it to be your calling because that's not supposed to be right. I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. We better
Yeah.
be enjoying it this much,
I
right? If
know.
it's your
Right.
calling. Yeah.
Exactly.
Do what you
Yeah.
love. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say, Tim, interestingly, it's so funny that I can remember like the dates and times of these events occurring. I was living in San Diego in would have been around 2012, 2013, just for a brief time. And I remember working with a woman who had mentioned psychedelic therapy. And it's before I was introduced to this concept at all. It was probably the first time I ever heard the term. And I remember having such a judgmental part of myself be like, psychedelic therapy. It was instantly judgmental and like diminished the idea and judged. Here's the inside view to myself. Judge, oh, that's such a California thing. Which, yay, California. But it was so interesting because that was my reaction to psychedelic therapy back in 2012, 2013. And then fast forward to like 2016, learning about psychedelics from the perspective of Dr. Richard Schwartz talking about it in the IFS online circle. And it was coming from a professional forum and from somebody that I really regarded. And I'd started to work with IFS in my own system. So I was becoming more self-led and more open and curious. And suddenly my response to psychedelic therapy had a whole new tune. And so it was really interesting what was happening in my own life just in the course of those 3 years or so, of how much personal evolution I was going through that made me actually really open towards this psychedelic thing that had such healing potential. Right. And that's what I was seeing as Dr. Schwartz was talking about. It was like, this is healing people with a diagnosis of PTSD. Like, that's unheard of. Right. There have been other modalities that have helped to reduce the symptoms of post traumatic stress, but nothing that's ever actually eradicated that from people's systems. So when I was hearing those statistics, it really caught my attention because that is at the heart and soul of what I want to do is help people have profound transformation. And somewhere in me, I believe that's possible. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, there's something. Well, my story. You're in North Carolina, right? Or Asheville area? Is that?
currently,
Yeah. Are
that's
you
right.
from that area?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm actually from the Northeast. I'm originally
Okay.
from upstate New York. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Well, I'm from South Carolina, and
Okay.
yeah, you kind of ruined where I was going there, but it still makes sense. Like this. So I went to San
It is a
Francisco.
Southern thing.
I went to San Francisco for 20 years to the Baptist school and got my master's of all places. And that's my background in seminary, but now IFS, I'm level 2 and it's changed my life. But some of my parts, like, and I found IFS and I still like Christ consciousness, Jesus, still a good thing. I think I even still consider myself Christian, but, it's weird. And parts of me wish I would
It's
have
weird, right?
become some white Buddhist. Nothing against white Buddhists, but
Sure.
have gone down the slippery slope that who knows, maybe I'll go there one day too. But there's a freedom in saying, yeah, I am. And little 7-year-old that thinks psychedelics are sinful, you're a part of me
Hmm.
and you're welcome. And you've got some pretty critical things to say about a lot of things, but you're welcome here. And it's weird. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
For sure. I'll
Yeah.
ask another question and then you can just keep talking to me though. But yeah, I would love to hear more about that calling, the psychedelics, the integration of that and IFS.
Okay, sure. So essentially, I've started working and walking the path of IFS and my own personal parts work. I dove into that right away, then was able to get into like level 1 trainings and all that good stuff. Thankfully, before the big popularity of IFS came, I was able to get into live trainings before COVID and all that. I'm so really grateful for my training. As I continue to learn about this like research that was being done through MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, it was like a magnetism that I've never felt in my life before. And so that in and of itself makes me very curious of like who was calling who. It's kind of like that bumper sticker for like little, adopt a puppy or something, like who saved who, the puppy or
Yeah.
the owner. I feel like with psychedelics, it was like who chose who. Like it felt like something outside of myself was just like magnetizing me towards working with these medicines. And it was so compelling. Like I just found myself, I watched everything on YouTube that existed at that time on psychedelic therapy. I was reading every book I could get my hand on. It was just like I couldn't eat up enough information about this phenomenon. And it wasn't, just to be super clear with the audience, psychedelic therapy is very different from people just getting high and doing psychedelics at concerts or raves or some sort of party scene. That use of these molecules ends up being really different than pulling it into an intentional healing therapeutic sacred space where you're actually using the medicine for the intent of some sort of transformational helpful healing process, right? It's super different. Although people can have these types of healing experiences in these other contexts, it's less likely since people aren't kind of bringing their attention to it that way. So when I was learning about it from this position, from this perspective, essentially I just had to keep learning more. So I was learning about different ways to get involved with MAPS, how to become a MAPS therapist with hopes of it becoming rescheduled, opportunity of working eventually in clinics where MDMA would be a legal resource for people to do this type of therapeutic work. And I really felt myself becoming an advocate of psychedelic therapy and specifically keeping the therapy in the psychedelic therapy modality, because it feels like there's this very tenuous space where some people might start to use psychedelics just thinking they can just do the psychedelic and that is the healing thing, not realizing it's also the therapy you do with it, right? So what we've learned is psychedelics aren't healing in and of themselves, but it's kind of the wraparound, it's the set and setting, it's the whole entire process that you bring into working with those molecules that creates the healing experience. So anyway, long story short, I was able to I actually initiated a MAPS site in Rockville, Maryland. I didn't end up staying with them long term, but that was my way of initially getting my foot in the door. I was able to go to the MAPS training and become mostly trained in their protocol for becoming a MAPS therapist. They have several steps of that. And then I started working with clients who were doing psychedelics with a healing intention. And as an IFS therapist, I was helping them do the prep, the integration, and really witnessing their process of people who are doing psychedelics with IFS were getting so much out of these expanded states experiences and really able to integrate a lot. And then I was also able to witness people who weren't using IFS and they were pretty much just doing psychedelics. There's kind of a whole community of people, this whole cohort of folks that I was getting to know. And I was seeing people who might do lots of ayahuasca ceremonies or lots of drug experiences, but they weren't having the true transformation that they were looking for, right? It's like something was missing. So anyways, what was happening for me in this space was this realization of how important working with our parts was in the context of doing these expanded states. And it was through that this vision for the Moxie School came about, which is now my current work, is where I train people who are really interested in working with these expanded states. I train facilitators and psychonauts and anybody interested how to do parts work in conjunction with working with expanded states. So yeah, that's kind of a fast forward to where I am now.
Yeah. And could you say just a little more? What are psychedelics? What are expanded states? And then I want to get back to
Sure.
a little more of that process of the prep But
Sure.
could you just give a little more insight to people who may,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe even those critics that are saying, what the heck, or
What
two?
the heck? Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. I'd love to get a little historic context here. So, psychedelics have been on Earth for as long as Earth has been here, including in psilocybin mushrooms and lots of different plants and bushes, like the ayahuasca vine. It's two different plants that are boiled together, creating a DMT stew. There are frogs that hold very potent psychedelic molecules. So, even bringing this back to the spiritual context, it's believed that even possibly the burning bush that Moses experienced was actually a psychedelic. It had psychedelic in it that created the manifestation of the visions that he was getting. But anyways, that's debatable. But the point is there's all sorts of plants, animals, and places in nature that we see psychedelic molecules growing naturally. They're even in our own pineal gland. We have DMT in our own system that's believed to be made potent at birth and death. So there's lots of different places where these molecules come alive in our own bodies and in the world that we live in. And when back in the 50s, when they were trying to determine what to call these types of molecules as kind of a class, I believe it was Gordon Watson who said, I think it was Gordon Watson, you can fact check me on that, but he came up with the term psychedelic because it was mind manifesting or soul manifesting. And so what they found about psychedelics is they help to go in and kind of amplify the internal experience of the unseen, right? Like our psyche, our processes, our ways that we make meaning about ourselves. There's all sorts of kind of, the invisible aspects of who we are that comes manifest and made known, and we can see and experience and become more aware of when we do psychedelics. They kind of amplify the unconscious and make it conscious. So there's different classes of psychedelics. There are classic psychedelics, which are tended to be known as like LSD, magic mushrooms, psilocybin, ayahuasca. Those types of known psychedelics are the classic psychedelics. And what makes them classic is that they can give like visuals of, things that are not readily seen or available to our access, that you can see these realms with these molecules, right? They can give like hallucinations per se. There are also another class of psychedelics that aren't so classic, but we kind of lump them into the container. They include things like ketamine and MDMA, and there's others that aren't exactly classic. They work on different neuroreceptors and that sort of thing, and they don't quite give the same type of maybe hallucinatory quality. So, for example, when somebody does MDMA, a lot of times what they're seeing, if they get visuals, it's of real stuff. It's like they see themselves as that little 7-year-old taking on all the beliefs of their culture and the criticisms of things and where they originated and some of those contexts, right? So you're not hallucinating your little boy. You're just seeing it like you would in a regular IFS session. So there's nothing wacky tacky there. We're already doing that in our regular therapy if we're doing IFS, right? So there's some different classes or ways that these different medicines kind of act on our neuroreceptors and the different aspects of the brains that they may work on. And so we have some different results of our experience of them. But yeah, it's super fascinating.
I mean, I have parts of me, and I think there's a lot of self in it too. Like, I'm just gonna go to South America and do the big one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. There's good things, but I also hear people like MDMA, like they can devalue. It's a different uh, category, and people can say, "Oh, that's less" or whatnot. And in many ways, it's different.
Sure.
But I wonder, like someone that is new to IFS, like if we meet it takes several sessions to kind of get in the mode, get in the zone, whatever the zone is. But would MDMA
That's
help
right.
maybe soften protectors in general, or speak more to that?
Yeah. Sure. Well, yeah. So what I would say is one thing I want to speak to first is kind of the difference between some psychedelics versus others is some hold a very strong cultural context to them. So, for example, ayahuasca. For people to go to South America, go to Brazil, do a big ayahuasca retreat, do the diete, do all the things, right? That is very much held within that shamanic tradition of the Shipibo people or whatever tribe you're going to work with. And it puts it into a cultural context that you really want to honor
Yes.
and enter with a very reverent space when you do it within that. It's not just taking that psychedelic, it's also
Yeah.
doing the entire process that has been built around that, which is beautiful. right? Like that ceremony in and of itself can become a beautiful process unto itself, even completely outside of the medicine,
Yeah.
right? And also, interesting about like something like MDMA is we don't have all that wrapped around it. Like this molecule was created in a lab and it was actually forgotten for 20, 30 years, kind of rediscovered, and realized, wow, this has really potent effects for helping people really connect deeply, right? And we don't have any cultural appropriation to stick with it. So it
Yeah.
actually makes, for example, MDMA is actually a lot more readily accessible to the Westerner who wants to do some deeper psychological healing because there aren't as many maybe ceremonial protocols that we want to be attending to. This is just different. Like I think there's kind of different context and ways that you're going to use each of these medicines. But in the context of MDMA, it can be probably, I would say, the most one-for-one direct correlation of what we experience in IFS, we'll find we can have in MDMA, which is different from like psilocybin mushrooms or LSD or ayahuasca or mescaline or 5-MeO DMT. Those experiences can be very so expanded, so otherworldly that we might not be connected to our personal biographical material as much. It might take us beyond that space. There's kind of like different dimensions that we can go to, particularly depending on the dosage. And so I think MDMA is a fabulous match for people who are working with parts and want to do a lot of like personal healing work. Other medicines can also be profoundly healing, but they might take you into a different kind of nuance or dimension or expression of that doesn't feel so IFS. So there's a lot of options.
And I will, and maybe it'll help listeners to give insight to my parts work too. Now, my managers are like, oh, yeah, I told you if you'd let this guy that wants to go to Brazil come up, yeah, cultural appropriation, you're going to be misunderstood and what. So I'm glad you brought up the cultural appropriation, and I'm aware of that with that too. But is there more to speak to of honoring that? I mean, you said a lot there, but.
Sure. Well, I think with any tradition you use that's been held by another maybe tribe or culture, we want to really enter into that space with a lot of like asking permission to enter, right? Like regarding it with reverence, recognizing the sacred practice of what may have been there for centuries before you came. But what I also understand from a lot of these lineages is they want the Western white folk to come and ask for their medicine.
Yeah.
In fact, I was just reading about this the other day, about a certain tribe in Minnesota that talked about a prophecy that talked about when the settlers would finally come back to the tribal people and ask them for their medicine, that would be a particular time in our era of a shift in our dimensions. That some people would choose that. Some people are going to come back to the tribal people and ask and request for their help, and other people won't. And they were describing these two different paths. I thought it was really, really interesting. So I do think that the ancient tribal traditions want people who are curious and open and serious about it, right? Who come with reverence. So I don't think that we need to go feeling like, who am I to come, to Peru or Brazil or something like that, but come with reverence and know that they probably want you to have their medicine. Like the invitation's open and they tend to be very happy to have you. So.
Yeah, that's helpful to hear too with that. Can you speak more to expanded states? And the reason I'm bringing that up, there's a spectrum there too, and IFS.
Absolutely.
Meditation is an expanded state, prayer, whatever you want to call it. But can you speak more on that continuum?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I love you just starting out even with that. Like IFS in and of itself induces an expanded state, maybe a more mild one than you would have with like a psychedelic. But think about if for any listener who's ever done a full 50-minute IFS session, when you close your eyes and you go inside and you begin sensing, hearing from, seeing your parts, you are using your imaginal realm to allow you to communicate with these inner aspects of yourself. And it's profound. I mean, when you think about the capability of noticing a part of yourself and being able to directly ask it questions and receive answers from it, that's a little psychedelic without taking a psychedelic. That is a expanded state. It is a multidimensional experience of me engaging with this part and it engaging back with me, right? And we know as IFS therapists, when we do IFS with our clients, one of the most central questions we ask is, how do you feel towards this part? Can the part feel that? Can it sense you? Can it take you in? It's this two-way direction, self to part to self, right? We do this process, that's an expanded state. We're connected to and communicating with these different parts of ourselves. And ultimately, as you know, we can unburden them, return them to their true essence, redeem their qualities, etc. I say personally that I believe, again, I'm not going to, this didn't come from the Institute. I don't know how they'd feel about this, but it's my sense, it's my belief that IFS is a shamanic practice, that it's like in Western clothes, like IFS is the Western clothes of shamanism. It's a palatable methodology that we can use that really gets into the heart and soul of these energetic beliefs and burdens that we carry, that we need some sort of resource to release from our psyche, right? So I think, again, spirituality comes in a lot for me of like this convergence of how the psychology, but the spirituality like really weave together, both from IFS and from psychedelics. It really converges in this spiritual space for me. So yeah. So back to your questions about expanded states. IFS is one in and of itself. Meditation absolutely can bring us into kind of states of oneness. I even had a friend who ended up doing a 10-day silent retreat. And in the course of that retreat, she went into a very, very intense expanded state of recalling trauma. She'd survived a house fire and she went into a huge experience, I guess you'd say, a re-experiencing of holding some level of consciousness while she was unconscious. She was out, getting into the hospital, coming into the ER room on a gurney. And in that silent meditation, she was able to finally see and reconnect to the whole thing of what was happening. She could hear it all, even though she was unconscious, right? It's like, well, who was listening? What part of her sentient being was fully aware of everything happening? So anyway, meditation's an expanded state. There's something else that's called breath work. And breath work is a really cool way to access expanded states in a pretty quick way. There's a certain patterning of breathing that you can do. It essentially brings a lot of oxygen into the body. And through the oxygenation, you can begin to connect with parts or other dimensions. People have rebirth experiences. If they had a really difficult birthing experience, they can go back and like essentially have a do-over with that type of material. So anyways, outside of psychedelics themselves, there are a lot of ways to access these states, even in fasting, etc. Prayer. Yeah.
Yeah. That was eye opening for me, is to just see, yeah, there's a spectrum there with that. And I'm curious, this may be a critical part of me coming in, but sometimes when I am leading in my own IFS session outside of any psychedelics or anything, I've never done it yet, but we'll see. Just to let people know, I'm still exploring and learning,
Yeah.
but I've known people close to me who have had great experiences, and I'm excited. But sometimes, back to my question, into my IFS journey in my own work and with others, sometimes I'm like, is this my imagination or is it a part or what? And I find if I could, that's a part that's jumping in. And how much
Right.
does it matter? Like, do you ever have those questions? Or, I mean, healing is happening and it's
Sure.
not a critical part saying, oh, this doesn't work. It's working, but we don't have to make sense of it
Right.
all.
Yeah, I think, Tim, your question is really interesting. So obviously you just named, like, there's the part of you that's worried about my just making this up. Is this just my imagination? Right. And what I want to offer is that societally, we have really burdened the concept of imagination as if it's false, fake,
Yeah.
inaccurate, doesn't hold value, etc. Oh, that's just your imagination, right? Just your fantasy, right? And our society, our culture has really diminished it. And what I'd say is, it is your imagination. What if you could actually honor your imaginal realm as a powerful part of you that has the ability to access you to really important information about yourself that you otherwise wouldn't be able to access? And so I believe that we need a rewriting of our understanding of the imaginal realm and how powerful it is to help convey deeper meanings and truths that we need to be able to have access to flow through to. So I'd say, yeah, it is your imagination.
Yeah.
Could the part who's nervous about that step back and allow you to like follow that thread that's coming through for you?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. No,
So
that's beautiful. Go ahead.
yeah.
No, I'm loving this. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's more to that. I'll keep trailing down that
Yeah. Keep
space.
trailing.
Is I've never, when I stay with, and I encourage clients to do this, because what you just named is a very common concern, right? Like a lot of clients bring that concern up of, am I just making this up? And my encouragement is always, let's just stay with it and see, right? Because if it's not valid, if it's something we're down a rabbit hole that doesn't apply, we will very quickly find out, right? Because in a way, Essentially, in IFS, we believe parts don't lie. There's no impetus for lying, and that whatever's there, like, actually wants to be known, right? And so we can essentially kind of test it out to see, just keep staying with it and just keep noticing, is this a part of you? And I've found hands down every single time in my own system and with all the clients I've ever worked with, I've never met material that was false.
Mm.
There's always actually a part there. So when I hear somebody afraid that they're just making it up, if we can bring the invitation for people to stay with it, whatever they're actually finding there always becomes very relevant. And so I've learned to have a deep trust in my system that whatever it's bringing forward is something that really wants to be known. And so if I am in, an expanded state and something's coming up for me, I personally now have the resource to trust what's coming forward and just stay curious, allow it to keep coming forward every time. Again, every time, hands down, it's something relevant, it's something important, it's something long to be known and heard and seen and witnessed and all that good stuff. So I think that's about building a relationship to your own system, of inviting more confidence that, like, yeah, whatever's going to come forward is real, right? So I'm curious how that lands for you.
Yeah. Actually, it lands well, but I do notice those critics like, what? You're,
Yeah.
yeah, look, you're getting schooled. Not that I feel, but you get what I'm saying there. Like, yeah, right. You're supposed to know what you're doing here. And there's a beauty in the saying, no, 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 no. And
Yeah.
it's not, who knows, but yeah, we like each other. We talked about that. And I still like you,
Totally
by the
like
way.
you.
Yeah. And no, but yeah. And I wonder if listeners can notice those voices that are coming in. Of course, there's reaction to this, but it's whether it's the one that is saying, there's your imagination again. Like, if you could just soften back, and the others, and in that spaciousness, like, I can hear you. And that's truth. And if I look back in my own work with clients, like, yeah, we find, yeah, it's right, it's good, it's truth. And parts of me, we'll get to that in a minute, because, like, what is truth? But yeah, I have never had a bad experience, but it's when those parts take over and drive that we don't get what we need. Yeah. And they're
It's
doing the best
true.
they
Yeah,
can,
when it gets
but
shut
it's true.
down.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. That's
It's
right.
good.
Just trying to
So
protect us.
that's the way it lands, and it helps me be aware, but to have some spaciousness, and it's freeing to know that imagination. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah, we don't have to demonize it or whatever there.
That's right. That's
So
right. Appreciate you just saying demonize it. It feels like that's
yeah,
just the truth, right? Like, I sense that the imaginal realm has been a very potent space for cultures who have a rich depth of spiritual experience, that they haven't shut down the imaginal realm, and that has stayed as a potent channel, a resource for them to connect to. And so when you say demonize, it's like, it's exactly right. Like, I think that culturally that aspect of ourselves has gotten really cut off, and I think much to our own demise, that we don't
sure.
have that richness, right?
Yeah. And as a gift back to the psychedelics, MDMA is kind of like a I don't want to say it's just westernized, but it has really helped our culture. I mean, there's still a lot more of embracing and a lot of work to do, but it has helped normalize a little more of some of this. So I'm
Absolutely.
grateful to things like that and the MAPS study
Yeah.
and all.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you could, like, someone that is just new up, as if they're going to go to a practitioner, they're going to experience this for their own healing. There's the preparation process, integration. What does that look like? What is the importance of the preparation, integration, and then the process? What does someone
Yeah.
do? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Let me give you the big wave tops first, and then I can go into a little more nitty gritty. I'm going to share with you what my preference, my wish for the world
Yeah,
is when it comes to
love
this.
it. Yeah.
It would be, in my ideal world for psychedelic assisted therapy, you know, potential clients would have the opportunity to be able to do some parts work for a handful of months before ever going into the psychedelic space. Because it's my perception, my experience, it's what I teach, is that by doing parts work, we give clients the ability to start exploring the internal landscape of their being, right? Because the reality is, we're not taught this in grade school. Nobody out there is teaching us about our parts, about managers, firefighters, exiles, right? Like those are all terms that we use in the IFS world. But essentially, like when we begin doing this type of therapy, we're like a whole new world is opened up for us of like, oh, that's my reaction to that. And that's where that originated. And it's because of that pain that I'm so this way or that way, right? We begin to get a lot of clarity around the different reasons why we're behaving and acting the way we do and how to approach that, right? So again, in typical society, we've been trained to avoid, defend, block off, argue, right? We have all these defense mechanisms, essentially different protector parts of ourselves that like resist and don't want to feel stuff. And so when we begin learning IFS, we're completely learning a brand new approach. It's like doing a 180. Okay, instead of avoiding, dissociating, shutting everything down, whatever we do, all those old school ways we used to be, we're now invited to actually turn towards and notice what's there and be curious and open up and welcome and wonder, what's this about, right? It's a totally different way of being. And so clients who want to do psychedelic therapy, it's my sense that if they can have this new experience of beginning to explore themselves and learn this new approach, self-led approach of getting curious towards what's there, that prepares a person extremely well for then doing a psychedelic where all that inner material that we already can explore with IFS is amplified, right? So my question to anybody would be like, why the hell would you go take a psychedelic if you don't know how to navigate that inner land? If you don't even know what's in there and you don't know how to navigate it, then what are you doing taking an amplifier? First, you need to put on your training wheels, right? Like go do some training wheels with parts work, learn how to get the feel of this. And then when you do a psychedelic, you'll be so well prepared to say, oh, that is a part, right? In the middle of a MDMA journey or ayahuasca journey or something like that. That's a part of me. Instead of feeling like, oh, that's something I need to kill or get rid of or kick out of here. You say, let me turn towards it and then get to know where did this get into my system from, right? It's a very different experience. And something I'd like to say about that is beautiful elders of our psychedelic community have been teaching this for years. The people who started the psychedelic research way back in the 90s have talked about, like people like Bill Richards talks about, if you see a lion, walk right up to it, right? Like if it's threatening to eat you, walk right into its mouth or things like this, right? This concept. And I love the proposal, but parts of me were asking, well, how do you do that? Right? It's one thing to say, turn towards whatever's approaching you. It's another thing to actually know how to do that, to actually be trained in that. Right. And so that's what IFS does for people in prep is it begins to lay the training grounds for knowing how to meet the stuff that's going to approach you in the psychedelic space. So you can do it without fear. And it also trains you how to begin being aware of self and getting access to self, because if we can stay self-led, even in a psychedelic state, we're like really good to go.
Right. Right.
Right. And so anyways, my ideal is for people to have lots of IFS sessions to really get an experience of approaching, getting to know their parts, learning what materials in here, what kind of burdens do I hold, and this ability to hold self energy for it all. And I think once people have a really good foundation of that, that to me feels like really good green go light for doing some psychedelics if they feel called to that. And and so then when they're in that space, they can navigate it a lot better. And then in terms of integration, we could just kind of fast forward over to integration. After the psychedelic state, because you've already been practicing your parts work in preparation, your integration becomes a natural follow through of everything you've already been doing. So essentially what happens in integration for people is whatever they were witnessing in the expanded state, could be breath work, psychedelics, meditation, whatever their expanded state was, they can then come back to IFS therapy afterwards and continue to process whatever parts they witnessed, whatever material was shown to them, whatever parts are reacting to all that can continue to be fleshed out and worked with, updated through regular IFS work. It's just a continuation of everything you've already done. So this really simplifies this mystery of how do you do prep? How do you do integration? What is that? It's like, well, you could just do IFS.
Yeah. And
It'll
that
be a full
self.
wraparound for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
Well, let me say this, and then I don't want to get away from your train of thought, but I am curious once you kind of finish what you're doing there, the in between, is that what the Moxie School does for practitioners? So I'm switching from the individual to the one leading and guiding in this process.
So for people who are guiding expanded states, that's what I do in the Moxie School is I essentially train them in parts work. So I teach the model and to people who otherwise can't get into IFS trainings, right? So IFS Institute, go there if you're a licensed therapist. If you've got the credentials to get in with IFS Institute, please go get great training, all about it. But there's a huge cohort of people who are doing healing work, but are not licensed, and they're not necessarily credentialed in the same way as licensed professional therapists. And if they're working in expanded states, if they're in this specific niche, I'm training them how to do parts work so that they have a really good lens of, again, all that territory of what's inside in terms of these parts and how do we approach them. So yeah, that's what I do at the Moxie School is I train people how to use parts work in this specific context.
And how does someone that is trained through the Institute, they know IFS, but they want to
Sure.
experience this, the guiding, how does that work? I guess I'm
Yeah.
asking for me. Yeah.
Like, well, what about me? Yeah. So, and I do have a lot of people who've been level 1, level 2, level 3 trained, absolutely come to the Moxie School for this specific type of education. And so I have my initial course is called The Art of Transformation. And that's essentially similar to a level 1, where you just learn IFS, right? Primarily, that's the majority of their course. The second course I have is called The Art of Guiding. And that's more of like a level 2 style course that is taking for people who fully know the model, who really get IFS and are practicing it. The art of guiding takes people into the full implementation of how do you integrate these two models? How do you work with expanded states and IFS, pulling it all together? And so in the art of guiding, it's currently a 15-hour workshop. I go through all the stages of working in expanded states from an IFS lens, and we integrate the entire process. So that's that workshop. It should probably be a 30-hour workshop because there's so much more that I could just expand it into. So it's very intense right now. And then additionally, I also have a mentorship program. It's called True Essence. And that's for people who are just like loving this realm of working in expanded states and IFS, who want to keep learning and apprenticing. And, we do supervision groups, we do demos, we do practice groups. So it's this ongoing experiential way to keep learning and implementing, working with parts in the context of expanded states. So yeah, so there's a lot of options for people who are both IFS trained through the Institute or not.
Yeah. And we're not done here, but go ahead and throw your website in there. Just if someone's listening
Sure,
now,
yeah.
where can people go to find more? Yeah.
Yep. So my website is moxieschool.com, and Moxie is MOXIE school.com. So people can find all the class info there. And I have Facebook and Instagram, but I'll just be super honest. I am not a social media fan. So there's probably not that much interesting to find there.
Got it.
Yeah, my website is definitely the best resource to get more information.
Okay, that's helpful. And then now I just wanted to go back. So you had mentioned kind of the highs that you were going to hit. Is there more kind of back to that process? Is there anything else? And if, yeah.
Honestly, that probably covers it mostly for the sake of a podcast space, that this is kind of like the overall integration. I will say, IFS can be used for the prep and the integration phases, and also it's likely that people would add other elements too, right? They might do, ceremonial things if they choose to. They might add other types of kind of classic psychedelic preparation things like setting intentions or creating invitations, or, those types of processes are a bit more specific to psychedelics spaces. And so, the invitation is to use IFS throughout. And also we might be adding some other components that are also kind of traditional in that psychedelic space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. It's good. And well, what else? What am I not asking?
Well, I think that I would just like to speak maybe briefly to the fear that, some listeners may have. I know that when I've talked about this work with some colleagues, sometimes I get like really open, curious, excited responses where people are, really engaged in this concept of doing psychedelic therapy. And I've certainly met plenty of people who hold a lot of concern and anxiety and hesitation around that. And so I think that I would just name that, again, culturally, I think there's been a lot of burdening around psychedelics in and of themselves, that in the 60s and 70s, we saw a really big revolution occur in terms of, the hippie movement and a lot of resistance to the Vietnam War. And there was a lot happening in the culture where certain groups of people who were using psychedelics were also the ones who were like war resisting and, protesting, and there was a lot of volatility in our nation around people who were doing psychedelics, right? And President Nixon came out and said Timothy Leary is the most dangerous man in the world. And it's like these types of things got into our culture. And then we had the Reagan administration, and they had a full program teaching that, that these
War on
drugs will
drugs.
kill your brain. Yeah. And it's eating your brain up and all this kind of stuff, which is actually 100% inaccurate. And what we've actually found from brain research is that some of these medicines, psychedelic medicines, actually help neurogenesis, which is helping stimulate your brain to grow new neurons, which is completely opposite from eating holes in it. So I just want to name that there's been a lot of propaganda, and it's really important to flesh out the truth from political agendas, right? To shut things down or to create terror and fear and all that kind of stuff. And I will also say there's also a cohort of irresponsible use in that time frame. It was a free-for-all. So I don't want to negate or deny that that is also true, that real people did die as a result of thinking they could fly and jumping off roofs and, unfortunately actually dying, like those stories are true. And so there's a balance that we need to return to that invites, and we do this in IFS all the time, right? Like reharmonizing the system. It's not about being in extremes. It's about returning to harmony and balance. And that's my invitation to being able to work with these molecules is what's the right relationship? What's the right fit? What's the right context? Where is it safe and healthy and sacred in terms of the place of these molecules? Again, I said it at the beginning of the podcast, like these substances are found all over the earth. They're not vile. They're not demons. They're not unholy. They're not bad for us, but they need to be explored of how do we come into right relationship and right use of them so that they can be used appropriately to honor them as substances that we have available and to honor us in terms of like what's good for our own kind of evolution and growth and healing. So yeah, I would just invite folks who might feel hesitant or unsure about this to really get curious, like where have those hesitations come from and are they still founded?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like do your own process around that to see like what parts of me hold some of these ideas or fears.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. And yeah, a good balance. And maybe that's a good place. We can talk more about psychedelics too, but the idea like things are different now, or however you just said it. And there are parts of me that want to go
yeah.
down I could go down yeah, there's a lot of political agenda in the war on drugs. And that's not where I'm going because my religious parts say, oh, I can't believe you're even leaning in that direction. And you're talking to this person about psychedelics. You said you think you're still Christian. These are my parts that are coming in. And it may
Sure.
be, I'm not going to edit any of this. I'm going to try to get it up. I will get it uploaded. But my point is like, I'm thinking like, oh, this could be the cutoff of and next week. Yeah, like I don't belong over there. And those parts that are saying, things are, and these are all parts of mine speaking. Sometimes they can take over, but it's not a fear base. It's just like, no, I'm grounded. Like it's okay to hold this tension and I'm content with
Yeah,
that. But those parts say
absolutely.
you're not supposed to be content. You're not supposed to be even talking about this stuff. I don't know if that's a good segue to spirituality, religion,
Yeah.
trauma, or not. But what do
Well,
you think? Yeah.
Tim, what I will say is that is honestly like a perfect, like if, I know this podcast is for your audience, but we're just playing with
Well,
you for a second.
I need, let's do it. Go.
Just as an offering of like, if you were a client of mine and you came in, what I just heard is a polarization, right? Parts of me are really curious about psychedelics. Some part wants to rush off to South America and do it. And another part of me says, wow, are you even considering this?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm just hearing part A, part B, polarization, tension in the system, right? Now, if I can drop my pro psychedelic part of myself and sit here with no agenda on your behalf, that would be what I'm saying is that would be a perfect IFS session to explore your polarization of your parts.
Yeah.
Just say, okay, cool. You got parts who say different things. Let's just go and get curious about them. And that would be classic prep work for somebody, because usually most people who come in wanting to do psychedelic assisted therapy do have polarized parts, right? Some parts who feel like really excited to do it and really longing for the depth of healing that they might receive from it. And other parts were like, oh my God, what are you doing? For whatever reason, like super fearful. I remember working with one lady in preparation, and she had a concern from a part who said, you're just trying to do drugs.
Mhm.
What are you just trying to like confuse yourself thinking you're doing therapy? You're just trying to do drugs. And I was like, whoa. I was like, we're not like doing drugs, like that's not the intent of her going into this expanded state. What's behind this? And as we started exploring it, she'd had in her earlier adult life a big history of drug abuse. It actually landed her in a hospitalization at one point, caused a ton of shame, et cetera, et cetera. So now her parts were super protective about going back in to do this type of therapeutic healing work because she had this other experience of drugs as being this bad thing that caused her a lot of harm. So it's really important. This is a beautiful example to give the listeners of like the parts work that was done prior to her further exploring anything with psychedelics was to say, hey, let's take a time out and notice the fear around doing this, right? Because some parts really long for more healing, but other ones are afraid you're just doing drugs.
Yeah.
So let's resolve and update the system that this is not the same context of what you're doing in your 20. This is now however many years later. And to update the parts, let them see the difference, kind of introduce, do the psychoeducation, whatever those parts needed to feel like, okay, I can trust the system with this if this is the right decision for us. Right.
Yeah. I
So
wonder if you could help me unblend a little bit, if that would.
yeah, if you're inviting me to help you,
I'm
I'm more than
inviting
happy
you
to.
to, yeah, I don't know. And by the way, those that are listening, like I've got a list of questions here that I haven't really even looked at. And I'm just this is the way you're supposed to do these interviews, I think. So none of this is scripted, but yeah, help. Yeah, I'm inviting you to work with my system a little bit.
Tim, I think this feels very fun. Thank you for inviting me to do that with you. Yeah. Okay. So let me just invite you to turn in. Just inviting you to really take whatever time you need to kind of drop away from the podcast itself and just notice like, what's alive for you, what feels really strong in this moment, anything speaking up.
Yeah. Well, I would say on the one side there's that part that says, oh, let's go. He's all out. He keeps life fun. Yeah, all
Mhm.
out. Let's do it. Let's go to South America. Other side is saying, oh, but what about those cultures? What about your culture? It doesn't fit in.
Mhm.
And you're going to go down a slippery slope and you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to be in trouble. Yeah. So, Tim, I'm curious if that's what feels like it needs your attention right now. I'm curious the one who wants to be all out. If I'm curious if that one can kind of rest back for just a bit to allow you to explore the one that's concerned about you being in trouble and going down a slippery
Yeah.
slope.
Yeah,
Does
and
that
that
feel
one,
right?
it does, because one voice for that one firefighter, like, that just wants to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like when I first mentioned, oh, I want to go, there's a part of me that wants to go to South America. He's glad that these critics are coming up because
Mm-hmm.
he's more grounded. Like he's not extreme. He can be
Yeah.
extreme, but he is glad to have the clarification.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And what I'm really curious about is their inner knowing of each other, right? If this guy wants to go out and go all out and have fun, and this other side is like, oh, but you're going to go down a slippery slope and get in trouble. Curious if this set of parts knows about that one who might hold
Yeah.
propensity to get you into trouble. Just curious if they have any awareness of each other.
Yeah, wild man over here, and that's a good term.
Huh?
He's aware of this side, but they're not. No, which is why it's helping him he wants them to understand him, but they're not aware.
Yeah. Okay. 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 So let's check in and see who wants to kind of be forward right now. Who needs the kind of the talking stick first? Is one or the other?
Yeah, the side that's saying, okay, you're going to get yourself messed up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's turn towards that side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you notice about them? Any images, sensations, concerns they hold?
Yeah, they want to share too, but there's a little tension. They're not, I'm noticing that they're tense. I can see them.
Mhm.
There's spaciousness there,
Yeah.
but please keep probing there because that's why we do our
Okay.
own work, right? But yes,
Yeah.
there's an openness, but there's also like, what do we say? Yeah.
Okay. And Tim, how do you feel towards those ones?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a curiosity and a
Okay.
compassion. Yeah.
Okay. So let's send them that curiosity and see if they can take that in and sense that from you.
Yeah, they can, and they're aware. Like this guy over here, that awareness
Mhm.
of each other is increasing in a good way with me in the center. Yeah, that's a good
Right.
thing too.
Yeah, that's a very good thing. Yeah, so you can really sense that your presence, you're here as a
Yeah.
resource for them.
Yep.
Yeah. So this side that's concerned of kind of messing up, getting yourself messed up, going on this slippery slope. Anything else they really want to kind of bring to your awareness about their concerns about? It sounds like they hold this tense anxiety or concern for you. What if there's more there they really want you to get or understand about where that's all coming from?
Yeah. Well, they want to know. Yeah, it's from a place of care. They're not
Mm.
just trying to be party poopers,
Yeah.
but yeah, they really do care. Yeah.
Right. Good. And I'm imagining, Tim, as you hear that, that might increase even more of your kind of like understanding of them.
For sure.
Yeah. 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 And what else? I'm curious if there's more around this concern for care, kind of taking care of you, looking out for you. I think they're afraid would happen if they weren't there holding the space to care for you this way.
Yeah, I'd go in some crazy direction and
Mhm.
be found out. I mean, this gets back to some of the religious stuff. Uh,
Mm. Mhm.
but yeah, you're gonna, and then shame. And yeah, yeah, you knew you weren't good enough. You didn't belong.
Mm.
You're gonna see that.
Yeah. Okay. Is that making more sense to you about where they're coming from?
It is for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe you can just kind of let them know that you're getting that that's making sense. These roots
Yeah.
in your earlier years.
Yeah. Yeah. And that things are, well, I mean, they matter. We're not going anywhere until there's a consensus here on both sides, but they're not alone
Yeah.
and things are different now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I love that you're offering them that consensus and that you're not going to have any part kind of rule your direction. Yeah. Curious who you just said things are different now. I'm curious if they're aware of that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, maybe Tim, you can ask this set of parts over here. Who do you know me as, or who do you sense me to be now?
They sent now, which is a good
Mhm.
distinction because even when I talk about this, and yeah, they can
Yeah.
come in and it gets constricted. There's a lot of blending. Now that they've given some space, they know who I am and they trust me,
Good. Great.
but
Beautiful.
they can get blended quite easily.
Yeah. Sure. And so maybe we should ask a different question, like who did they know you as originally?
Yeah.
I think you're just maybe alluding to that. That might be important.
Yeah. Yeah. And they knew me as that little, yeah, 7, 8 year old in South Carolina that, yeah, the church boy, the little, which he's still there. They're still, I mean, this all
Yeah.
belongs.
Right.
But yeah, as a young little one. Yeah. Much
Yeah.
younger. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So it sounds like and I don't know that you want to do this here now, but it sounds like a good trailhead to like if those parts knew that you could be with that little one who I think you referenced feeling like he doesn't belong, this concern about like being perceived as crazy or like some deep end with some religious stuff, maybe. I think that's what you alluded to.
Yep.
It sounds like there's material there that if these protectors knew that you could go heal that original sense of like feeling weird or odd in this kind of space as a 7-year-old, that might help bring a little bit more self energy or curiosity towards this new experience where things have changed.
Yeah. There is. And I've had this in my own work, just so listeners know. I mean,
Mhm.
I've done work on
Yeah.
this, and it's not that
Mhm.
I'm making things up here, but I've done this work, and so it helps. But
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
there was a time, actually, I was PAing in a training, and clients were working with my system. And I find, yeah, if I can't be real, I can't do the fake it thing. But
No.
there was a beautiful story, yeah, of where my protectors softened back because there's a little boy there
Mhm.
who, yeah, he didn't fit in. And
Yeah.
just there was a time, and then we can get back and go. But yes, there's been a story of where I've walked with him. He's come to the present
Mm.
and just a beautiful healing there. But just like those managers or those critics are easy to get blended, this little boy
Mhm.
is too. And he
Yeah.
could be unburdened over and over again. And it's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Let me stop there
So
and
there's
let you, yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and it's clear that the way your parts know you and that they know who you are now, it's clear that you've done this this footwork, this pre-work
Yeah.
in this realm. Yeah. And so, again, just kind of from a perspective of like what, some sort of preparation work would look around that. Like that is, if there's other parts of you that wild man really wants to go to South America and do this, it would be consulting with these other parts who are hesitant and saying to them, like, what do you need, or what do you need to know? What would it take? What would make you feel comfortable in order to proceed with this? Or does this feel like a solid no from y'all? Right. And if it's an absolute no, then what we know is there's not internal consent to proceed. Right. And I would encourage you just to keep staying with the no, right? Like, please don't override parts, right? That's like
Yeah.
really
Right.
bad news. And I don't think you would do that, but just,
I get
what
it.
we would say
Yeah,
to the
for
audience. So,
sure.
yeah. But, it'd be interesting to hear what these parts would want or need to know we're safe,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And what I am noticing now is
Uh-huh.
that they just, first of all, Wild Man, he doesn't want to go to South America, for example, without them, or go extreme without them, but he
Yeah.
wants them to know that he can get extreme, but he's not so
Uh-huh.
extreme. I mean, a lot of self, that's the gift of him, like the self that makes me, talking to them. And then those critics or parts that are hesitant, they're saying, yeah, where there's definitely not a hard no. There's quite a bit of buy-in. Just this helps to understand. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Yeah.
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, have you explored Wild Man much up to date?
Yeah. You're saying, have I?
Yeah. Are you familiar with that
Yeah.
part?
I would say I am more and there have been times where I'll use the word demonized it, because man, our parts but I'm like, wow, yeah, you can get me in trouble. Like one time I took a minivan in the woods with my kids because I'm in Wisconsin now, trying to get used to living in the country again, but I'm a city boy. Like there's a lot of parts going on, but it's funny.
Right.
I had to have someone come tow me out, and I won't get into all that. But my point is I'm saying, wild man, you can get me in trouble, but man, I love you. Like, a
Yeah.
much better
Sounds adventurous.
relationship with Wild Man, who can also, and maybe we can transition to the religious stuff out of this, or we'll see how to
Sure.
go. But I'm also much more comfortable with him leading, like taking the reins of the bus and say, let's go down the slippery slope, Wild Man, and I'm with you. And these guys over here are like, wait a minute, too. So I love him and I love them, but I can forget I love them, the other side,
Yeah.
that are
Right. Right.
critical.
Yeah.
And to say, oh, you're bad. I mean, I don't tell them this. There's a good relationship in general, but it wasn't so good. It's good to be reminded over and over again that these guys that are, the little church boys or whatever, like they're doing the best they can to, or that are racist. And
Yeah.
they say a lot of bad. I mean, yeah, they're not bad either. They're doing the best, but they and Wild Man can be on the same team, and
Yeah.
they don't have to work so hard.
Sure. And ultimately, like for them to come into relationship with you, that you get to be the master of the ship, right? In your self leadership, in your adulthood, in your development, in your maturity, maturation, right? To invite these parts of like, I know that you've taken the lead in the past, but what if you could turn towards me and allow me to have the lead, and you can be there with me, right? Along for
Yeah.
the ride, along for the fun, along for the energy. But what if you could trust that I can make a good informed decision for our system now, right? So it's not just like one side or the other kind of taking
Yeah.
the reins, right?
And it's a beautiful, and that's what we're doing with our parts, like just that
Yeah.
beautiful relationship. And that's what I'm sensing now more. And that's what
Mhm.
I'm sensing in my life. I mean, this practice of, and I am like, it's okay to say Christ consciousness. And Wild Man can say Buddha nature and whatever. He can go as extreme as you want, but there's a beauty. And that's where like the mystery, like, I am so comfortable, but my background and that trauma says you're not supposed to be comfortable in your calling.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I've just
Beautiful.
totally thrown. Where do we go from here? Yeah. And my system,
Yeah.
just so I know as a practitioner, maybe these are my parts, but that was helpful. And hopefully
Good.
listeners could see that
Yeah.
unblending. And if you feel like there's a little bit more to do there, I'm open. But Yeah.
I feel good. I wasn't sure how far down the road you wanted me to take you. And so I was like, just kind of doing a little bit. You said, help me unblend a little bit. So I thought, well, okay, we'll just do a little tiny piece here. I could have kept going, but I
For
thought,
sure.
is
Yeah,
that,
and there are parts.
that might,
I mean, I say there are parts. Well, there are parts. Yeah, that wanna. Maybe I have to have you back. That wraps up another episode of IFS Meditations and Insights. If you found value in today's session, please follow, subscribe, and share with others who might benefit. Your positive review helps more people discover this healing work, so leave a review if you haven't yet. For more IFS meditations and resources, visit exploreifs.com.